It's Charlene Lee here, broadcasting live from San Francisco. And I wanted to talk today about a topic that can be a little bit uncomfortable, and that is the whole area of intimacy. And I know that some people may think like that, well, why are we talking about intimacy? That's very personal, it's very private, it's something that I share with my most beloved people in my life. But I also think that what we experience oftentimes is intimacy that is very deep in our friendships and the relationships that are most important to our lives. I mean, after all, you think about one of the most wonderful experiences you could ever have is an intimate gathering in somebody's home, your own home, where you gather a small group of people together. And there's this intimacy, there's a level of sharing and comfort that comes from knowing that you're in a safe space. And I think it's time for us to be thinking about how do we create that kind of safe space, that familiarity, that intimacy in the workplace. So that's what we're going to talk about today. I know it can make you feel a little bit squeamish. I have an interesting relationship with this whole word intimacy as well, especially when it comes to work. And in the context of, for example, the Me Too movement, where some people may have pushed the boundaries of what intimacy means at work, especially in the physical space. But I do believe, and this is my key tenet for today, it is that intimacy is absolutely important. That level of comfort, of trust, of acceptance, of knowing that you are amongst people who care deeply about you and are looking out for you. That is most important to have, that intimacy, if we are to do the most transformative work for ourselves as leaders and also for our organizations. I fundamentally believe that you cannot become transformative, to do this hard work, to go on these journeys of transformation, unless you are feeling very safe, very accepted, basically intimate in the place where you work. So we're going to talk about intimacy today. And let me just go into the definition. I, again, looked up all the various definitions out there, and it comes down to this, that there's a sense of closeness, of familiarity, of friendship. And when you think about it, those are all essential parts of any relationship. And relationships are what define leadership and the way that we work with each other. It's the relationship we have with each other that really defines what leadership looks like, and also how we get things done. It is not about a title. It is really that relationship you really go and put together. So this word about the reason why I looked at intimacy, and I think Michelle has a really good point. You know, why even use this word in the workplace context? Is it clickbait? I don't think so. The reason I've been thinking about this is that when you think about that word, what intimacy means, I like to think about it as meaning into me you see. Into me you see. You see me as my whole self. And the only way I can bring that into the workplace is when I actually see you and feel that I can see you and that you are completely comfortable being vulnerable. But it also means that I, as a person in this place, also need to feel comfortable with that. And the reality is that when we start getting really close to people, we may be wanting to pull away. We may be wanting to think that this is uncomfortable for lots of different reasons. And in many cases, what I've seen is the same level of discomfort of getting close to somebody, of that intimacy in that relationship. So when I think about the space of how comfortable are we having that sense of closeness, of having this, it really comes down to think about intimacy in new ways. Of course, there's a physical intimacy that you might share with somebody very close to you, a spouse, your beloved. But there's also the physical intimacy that we have with each other in the context of friendship. A close hug, for example, eye contact, handshakes, these moments of touch, of physical intimacy. And we all have our boundaries of how far we can go with that, especially in times of COVID. But we know that this level of connection, of touch, even if it's just bumping elbows or waving hello, some sort of physical way of being connected to each other is important. And just like any other area of intimacy, it stretches the boundaries and our definitions, because what's intimate to me may be past your boundaries. So understanding that across these different dimensions of physical, and I'll talk about the other 4 areas, is extremely important. So other areas of intimacy, again, and a key one that we often share is intellectual intimacy. This is when we have an exchange of ideas, of meaningful conversations, and we feel connected to each other. We feel like, oh, I have a kindred soul here. This person thinks the same way I do. And when you meet people like that, it's amazing. I have a friend, Asha, who I've been developing this fantastic friendship, even though we're on exact opposite coast. She's in New York, I'm in San Francisco. We have this level of intellectual pursuit. We're in similar areas, but we also have a level of emotional support too, as well, because of experiences. So intellectual is just one of the areas. I mentioned emotional intimacy, which is when you can feel like you can be yourself, when you can let your guard down, that there's a sense of mutual vulnerability, that you can say anything to me and I'm not going to be judgmental about it. In the same way, I can share something without, again, ever fearing of being judged. And then there's experiential intimacy that comes from having gone through an experience together. You went on a trip together. You went on a hike. You worked on an intense project together. You tackled a really impossible task, something that you thought would be impossible to do, this audacious thing that you set out to do, and you did it. Or you didn't, but you survived. These are things that you go through together. It's why there's such a level of closeness and intimacy amongst people who have gone into the battlefield together or been on these projects together. But it also could be as easy as, we do this all the time. We have shared experiences from watching TV shows, like Game of Thrones or Ted Lasso. And even if we haven't watched it together, because we've been through that same experience, we have this reaction, and it's this experiential thing that we shared together that brings together a level of intimacy too. And then finally, the fourth area, in addition to physical intimacy, is spirituality, where you have common values and beliefs, and there's this connection, again, with somebody who believes in the same things that you do. And could be religious, again, having a shared religion, but also meeting somebody from the same religious denomination. And understand each other immediately, that you have this spiritual intimacy that you can share with each other and be open about that. But it also could be values of, for example, curiosity and kindness and empathy. So these are the 5 areas of intimacy, just physical, but also intellectual, emotional, experiential, and spirituality. I bring this up in that the idea that this is a really important area, because the key area of really understanding that level of intimacy comes from common things like respecting each other, having trust and acceptance and honesty, empathy, affection. These are all things that are really important in the workplace to develop these kind of relationships, because in the end, we need to be thinking about how do we become intentional about developing our relationships. And if you think about the best job you ever had, the best team you've ever worked on, there was this level of closeness that you have with each other. And again, it may be translated in just this work relationship, this closeness, but it could also be translated into friendships that also develop in the long term that you have. So the question I have for today, and I can see from some people, Michelle in particular, that there's some significant issues and discomfort with using this word, which is exactly why I'm going to go and talk about this. Again, we can have a discussion about using that word intimacy, whether it's the right place to be talking about it. But if I look at all of these things, is that we are thinking about all these different connections and ways that we can connect with each other. And this is not about, thinking about issues around discrimination or other things when it comes to understanding people. It's really seeing people for who they are. I've talked quite a bit about the importance of inclusion and belonging. How do we do that in a thoughtful way so that we're including everybody regardless of their backgrounds. And I fundamentally believe that when you are thinking about how to see people for who they are, really understand them, this is what we're talking about. So one of the reasons why this raises such issues is that we have been trained from the very beginning of our careers to separate our professional and our personal lives, to keep things professional. You don't bring your messy to work. You know, if you have issues going on in your personal life, you deal with it. And then you come to work ready to work out of respect for your colleagues. And I think in many ways that's absolutely important. But I think also we run the danger of checking a key part of ourselves in terms of understanding what we can actually bring. Can we bring our experiences, all of our lives, our ways of thinking? And do we feel safe doing that? And I think a key area of this is understanding what are your limits? What are your boundaries? What are the things that you believe you want to be able to share and to be able to hear and are comfortable at work? And then knowing what those limits are. I'll give you an example. I will oftentimes share stories about what I've learned from being a parent, from my experiences around just engaging with people outside of work. But at the same time, I have my limits. I will never share the names of my kids. They're grown now, so they can share themselves. But I feel like it's their lives, their personalities, their reputations that I want to protect. So I'll share the stories, but I won't tell like personal stories about them unless it's in the context of something that I think would be beneficial for work. And when it comes to my relationship with my spouse, that's completely off limits. It's just something that I want to keep private. I feel like it's sacred. So everybody has a limit of what they can share and what they want to share about. Some people will share more. I sometimes feel like there's too much information being shared. Like, why are you sharing this? It's past my boundary of what I feel comfortable hearing. And I will oftentimes say, you know, I appreciate you want to share this, but I'm not in a place where I can really hear that. That's too close. That's assuming a level of intimacy that may or may not be there that you think is there. So some ways, I have some comments here. I'm just going through them and watching them because before the next thing I want to do is to say, how do you actually develop these intimate relationships at work when you want to deepen them because you feel like these are some things that will, again, be very helpful. Let's see. I have Jay here. Jay, thanks for chiming in. I look to create and find common interests is how you develop these relationships. You talk about our kids, our art and hobbies, open to sharing and taking time to understand the work and personal challenges. So I really appreciate that, Jay. And I also see from Sean, yes, this is a topic it needs to be discussed. Thank you for appreciating me, Sean. I really appreciate that. And then let's see, we have Jay Johnson also saying intimacy transfers into trust and respect. So these are some examples of this. Let's see. And then we also have, we have Marissa who's saying it's so elevating when you truly click with a team and can support each other. It's a rarity, but so special. So I think in many ways, what we're hearing is, again, what I'm hearing from people. And again, I know this is a touchy subject, and I really want to acknowledge that some people may feel this is inappropriate. This may be too close. But from what I've seen, I think you see some of the comments here. This is something that we need to discuss and to talk about how do we deepen these relationships, truly go into this area that we may not feel so comfortable and to understand why we're not comfortable with it. So I have 4 ways to think about how to deepen relationships and create a sense, a deeper sense of intimacy, that you have this connection, you have this familiarity, you have this level of trust where you can really, truly be yourself. So the first one as a leader is to make it safe. Be a non-judgmental listener. Listen to understand. When somebody's sharing something to you, really try to understand. Put away that thinking hat. Put away that reaction self of you to get into there and fix things. I have such an issue with this because I'm a fixer. I'm a pleaser. I want to make people happy. So I really have to hold back and truly listen to understand. I'm just listening to understand this person who's sharing with me, because it's taken them so much energy to come and talk to me in the context of work about something that they're very concerned about. And so I do this all the time. Again, this is a practice that you can have all the time. Just listen to understand. And then, very importantly, feedback. Read back to them what you heard. So you can say, let me understand. You said this. You feel this. You wish this. Did I get it right? So getting that confirmation, it is such a simple thing. And then you can say, well, what would we like to do next? I have some suggestions. Is that what would you like? Or do you want to support? It is so difficult sometimes in the rush of your everyday meetings to have to take time and listen with that intent of understanding. But guess what that makes that person feel? It makes them truly feel that those are the things that person really matters. And they will feel that stronger connection to them. So the next thing I would say is to be strategically vulnerable. Again, these are places where you decide, in order to build deeper relationships, to build that deeper intimacy with people, that deeper connection, is to share something that you otherwise wouldn't. And it's to demonstrate something. You could share something that happened to you. You could express a feeling that you've experienced, joy, sadness, frustration, whatever that is, or a past experience that you haven't shared, that you've been holding on to. And, I've been, think I really want to share this. And I'm not completely comfortable with it, but I think people would really benefit from hearing about this. So I think in many ways, being strategically vulnerable, understanding where you sharing something about yourself can open up other people to say, wow, that was coming from our leader, something that was really different. And that's going to change their view of what you are thinking, who you are, open up new perspectives, and really, again, change things up to maybe encourage other people to share their experiences too. The third thing I think is to really make an effort to know each other. I mean, when you're developing a relationship, in our personal lives, we are curious. We ask questions of each other all the time. And when it comes to work, we just think, well, maybe I shouldn't be asking these things. Maybe it's too close. But I think, again, these sort of icebreaker questions are incredible ways to get to know people and to understand who they are and what they're saying and thinking. So you could ask questions, you can swap stories, go around and ask lots of questions. So I'll give you a couple examples. If you could choose anyone in the world, alive, dead, who would you have over for dinner? These are just common things. And why would you have them over for dinner? What's your favorite childhood memory? Things like, what activities would make a perfect day for you? Like, what brings you joy? So these little things at different points to get to know each other. We know that when we sit down for business meetings, we don't immediately get to things. We ask, how was your day? We ask these kind of questions, because forming that human connection, that level of familiarity, connection, intimacy, again, is so important to establish trust, to establish understanding. So the key idea here is that understanding, like, who are you and why you're doing things. The impact of this, when you ask these questions and you remember the responses, it is so important. I remember I was working at a company and a junior person just came out of it was running into the office. Goes, I just had the most incredible experience. I was riding up the elevator with the CEO and he remembered my name and he remembered something from my introduction. She goes, I'm just like a little junior person who just graduated from college and who remembered me. And that sense of being seen and known by somebody when you don't expect it is just incredible. And I think the fourth thing is to seek to understand, not to agree. Again, this goes back to listening strategically and listen for understanding. But this is an important one because of the not agree part. You can do all these things, make an effort to understand, to learn, to be curious about people, and you may not be that comfortable with it. The key part of this is acceptance, accepting that person for who they are, that you can't change them, that this is the core of the makeup of who that person is. Now, you may not like it, but having empathy for why they think this way is really important. and this is, again, especially in a time when we find more reasons to be different from each other than to be similar. It's so much more important to understand, and you don't have to necessarily agree. You may not even like those responses. That may not be for you. Somebody may like to go snowboarding. I like to go skiing. You get the idea. It's not about having all those similarities. But again, I think it's also being able to understand, accept, respect. And it goes into this area of unconditional support, that no matter what happens, you have my support. And we can talk about ethical breaches, those kinds of things, then the support would be withdrawn. But when you're doing your best and you're doing the right thing, but we may have some disagreements about the way we see the world, can we come to the point of acceptance of that and truly understand where the person's coming from and respect it? So those are 4 ways to think about how to deepen those relationships, to create that level, that sense of familiarity, that sense of intimacy, and in the workplace. So I just want to see if there are some additional questions that we had. Keith Knox says, yes, so true. I'm sorry, Knox Keith. So true. We had a CMO congratulate a junior analyst when the junior analyst purchased his first home. The CMO leverages social media to do this. Important channel to connect with your teams when leveraged correctly. Absolutely. Again, I feel like the technology that is out there today allows us to listen at scale, to understand, but also to transmit this level of knowledge, of deepening relationships across the board. Because this junior analyst was really impressed by the CMO reaching out. But think about all the other people who experienced that same level of intimacy as that junior analyst, who said, wow, the CMO did that for that junior person. CMO really cares about us as a group, understands us, sees us, maybe not everything, but that person is there and really trying to connect and develop this. All right, I'm just seeing if there's any other issues. Okay, and Knox just wants to point out the CMO, John Starkworth, I think he's preaching each day is human to human. That's fantastic. I love that, human to human. So, and yes, Keith, Knox, I will be sharing this. This is streaming live on YouTube, so you can just go there right now and you'll be able to see it there too. So you can share this too with people. I think those are the major issues. I think Catherine also has an interesting point. I think this is generation specific attitude to have at work. I do think that it's that millennials and Gen Z are much more attuned to this. They're much more comfortable talking about this. But I'm firmly in Generation X, at the leading edge of that. And having dealt with not only been in that group of Generation X, but also dealing with many of my boomer cohorts who are in executive ranks with me and in this time of life with me, it's something that as a whole we're struggling with, which is why I talk about this. And the reason why so many of us struggle with this is, again, we were trained. It was beaten into us that you do not talk about personal at work. You do not be personal. You do not lean into that area. And I found this to be particularly true for women who are in my age group, into our 50s and 60s in the professional world. We have this really strong delineation. Because if we talk about what happens in our work, we're seen as less than, we're seen as being in a place where we are dealing with all these realities. And when we talk about that, we're seen as not as capable. Whereas when men talk about it, they're seen as, wow, you're so full-fledged, you're so comfortable talking about all of this. And if you're a woman talking about it, it's not as acceptable. That's a generational thing. And so there is an issue, I think, around this. And I think it's still true even for the younger generations. But we start changing this when we can create this even playing field, when we can talk about the most important things in our lives, not just about work, but talk about these other things. So how important is it to say, to be able to say to somebody, I'm here for this meeting. We do a check-in. Let me go back. So one of the things I oftentimes do when I'm running team meetings, I'll ask people, so how are you walking into the room today? How are you greeting? How are we greeting each other? How are we doing? Let me go around just a quick check-in with people. Like, I'm good, I'm motivated, I'm good. Had a late night last night. Another person was like, I was up all night with a colicky baby. I'm here. I may not be at my peak performance here, but I'm here. I'm going to do my best to be present. And we can all appreciate that. We understand where that context person is. And it's not to necessarily give him or her cut slack, but it's to understand where that person's coming from. And that level of trust, that ability to know that everyone has your back, that you're not going to be judged, is so important, I think. So for us to create that and to get more comfortable developing relationships that mirror in many ways the type of relationships we have in our personal lives, the friendships, the deep kind of connections that we have. Because the stronger the relationships we have at work, the more comfortable we're developing these levels of intimate relationships at work. I think the stronger our teams will be, the stronger leaders we will be, and the stronger our organizations will be to tackle these audacious transformational goals that we set for each other. So I look forward to hearing more from all of you and really understand what some of the key things are. So I just want to I have a couple other quick reactions and comments from people. So Jay says the resistance to change disruption occurs when groups' mores are challenged. Factions are a result of perceptions of differences. And Jay, I know you have been often talking about these deep divisions that we have and the need to be able to bridge those differences. And I think, again, the resistance to many ways, the ability to want to say, like, that's them, that's us, to play politics, those don't help us. So thank you for sharing that. Knox Keith says, so true, we grew up with leaving personal at the door of the office, checking things at the door. This has been the ways that we were raised as professionals. I can say that as a woman and as a person of color, that I've had to leave those aspects of my personality, my perspective at the door and not be comfortable sharing that. And I've become so much more comfortable sharing that just in the past decade. But it's only just in the past decade that I feel comfortable enough, secure enough, and been in places where I work that I felt comfortable doing that. So thank you very much for that. And then again, just a great point. This is very much what Brené Brown talks about, how important vulnerability is to be able to connect, to be able to lead, to be fully functioning and contributing members of society. We need the strength and the confidence to be vulnerable. So I'm just going to leave it at that for now. I am going to just share a little bit more about what's happening over the next couple of weeks. I'm going to be traveling. I have some time off, so I'm going to be traveling to, of all places, Morocco. Why not Morocco? Why Morocco? Why not Morocco? It just opened up. I've never been there. So I'm really looking forward to experiencing a completely different culture, deeply engrossing myself into that space. So I will be broadcasting, fingers crossed, next Tuesday, the 22nd. And it's a very special day because it's my birthday, February 22nd in 2022. So I love numbers and dates, 2/22/22. And we're going to be talking about developing a culture of feedback. So fingers crossed, I'll be in a place with really good connections, internet connections, and be able to broadcast from a really unique place. I'll be taking the week of March 1st off because I'll be traveling, and then I'll be back on March 8th. So really looking forward to connecting about one of my favorite topics, which is feedback. I fundamentally believe if we're better at feedback, we'd all be better off. So I'll be sharing some fun stories and some examples of ways to think about feedback in a way that you can scale it. All right, just checking to see if there's any other things. Marissa, thank you for wishing me a great trip. And Jay, for safe travels. I really appreciate all of you joining. And I will see you in a week on the other side of the world. All right, take care, everyone. Have a great week.